Welcome, dear listeners, to Satanists Nextdoor. We're your hosts, Lillian Levine.
And Tommy Levine.
Whether you're an open-minded, curious onlooker or a fellow Satanist seeking camaraderie, our goal is to share our personal experiences and delve into the intricate tapestry of Satanism in our daily lives, occasionally inviting other guests to share their unique perspectives, leaving no pentagram unturned. We'll explore how our beliefs shape our views on society, dive into struggles and triumphs we've encountered, and reveal the humanity that unites us all. So grab your favorite chalice and join us on this captivating journey. Satanists Nextdoor is ready to peel back the curtain and offer you a glimpse into our world, one captivating episode at a time.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Satanists Nextdoor. Today we are going to be covering pushing religion into schools. The stuff we're kind of seeing here, especially on the front lines. Texas, Texas and Florida have both gone a little bit batshit crazy with this sort of stuff. So we're definitely seeing an uptick of religious ideology being pushed into schools either by law or just by mandate, I guess you would say.
And as parents who live in Texas, who have kids that attend school, obviously we are a little bit more attuned to what's happening in this particular state. So it's not to say this isn't happening across the nation. I know it is. Multiple different states are dealing with it from different vantage points. But for us, there's been a huge amount of religious-leaning laws that were pushed towards schools in this last session in specific.
Yeah, some of them got through, some of them didn't. But because they didn't doesn't mean that they stopped. When they don't, they just kind of go back to the drawing board and say, okay, how can we get these other 4 people on board or whatnot in order to get this passed? Yeah. So it's just because it doesn't win the first time through is, definitely not necessarily a victory. It's more of a regroup for them.
No, and I think as we'll later discuss, we're going to talk about how this has been an ongoing problem. And usually, it wasn't even about religion in the first place. Religion was used as a way to toe in the door different things at different points in time and to really test the waters to see how far they could push things. They being individuals that were hell-bent on putting religion into school. It's not every religious person. There's plenty of people I've heard that are incredibly religious, some of them being devout Christians that were against a lot of these things.
Yeah, and I guess, my opening statement when it comes to religion in schools, and when we say schools, we are talking public schools. Mm-hmm. So public schools, which are supposed to be secular. Private schools, do what the hell you want. That's if you're sending your kid to a private school and it's a religious school, you made the choice, you're paying for it. That's what you want them to do. And then, if you're not happy with that, you can always remove them from the private school. But
yeah. And I'm not going to, I know what you meant, but we don't mean do whatever the hell you want, as in we don't care what happens to those kids. We mean, you have the right to remove your kids at any point in time, and I would hope for the amount of money you pay for private school, you checked it and you were either fine with it or whatever.
Yeah. And so, with public schools, they are supposed to be secular. And so when I hear parents complaining that they've taken God out of the classroom, or, we need more religion in school, or God will stop the mass shootings in schools. Oh, well, the first one to that, if God's going to stop mass shootings in schools, then why isn't God stopping pedophilia in churches? That would be my first question to that, because, obviously it's not working there. But if you want your child to have a religious education, it's really, really pretty simple. Enroll your child into a religious private school. Mm-hmm. Maybe sometimes they're too expensive. Okay. Tell your pastor to sell one of his mansions and lower the price of the school. But you don't punish everybody else in the state because you want your child to have a religious education, and you want that religious education to happen at public school, which is supposed to be secular. Yeah.
And to be clear, I have no issue with education including religion. But if you're going to include religion, then it has to encompass all religion. And it has to be as unbiased as possible. And when we're using faith as the position we're coming from, it's going to inherently have a bias. And that doesn't allow kids to formulate thoughts about what they really understand or believe when it comes to religion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of on the fence whether religion should be taught in school or not. I understand where you're coming from, where it does have historical value, it has educational value. The problem that I run into is I just know people, and I just know that, okay, they're going to be like, oh, well, we've got to cover all of them. So Christianity is going to get 95% of the time, and then we're going to shove all the other religions into the 5%. So.
Right. And that's where it becomes very tricky. I just feel like historically, religion is a very important component on just development of countries across time. So to ignore the parts that religion played would be really stupid, in my opinion. And if you're going to discuss them, people have to have a basis to understand what they mean. And that's also tricky because every religion we have today was different 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And as far back as you want to go, they've evolved to a degree over time. I mean, like the evangelical movement obviously is not the same as the, Catholic beginning that a lot of people had.
Yeah. I mean, evangelicals and Catholics are on like two totally separate sides of Christianity, which both of them kind of call each other not Christians. They're that far apart. And part of this will be anything from, putting the Ten Commandments into schools. But one that you've brought up a lot is, corporal punishment in schools, spare the rod, spoil the child, the whole thing that they argue using religious doctrine.
Yeah, that was one that was presented. That was a bill that actually didn't pass. And it was House Bill 772. It was presented earlier this year, being 2023. And the argument was to remove corporal punishment. So the bill, if it would have passed, would have removed corporal punishment as an option. At this time, I believe only 19 states allow it, which is still way too many. Out of 50, though, 19 is much better than it could be. I would like 0. But the bill, which was defeated by 86, it was a 58 to 86 vote, often had people bringing up religion as the reason why it had to stay. That paddling to provide the corporal punishment was in line with biblical philosophy, where we are wise members to follow the design that God has for disciplining children, is what one of it was. Schaefer, who's a representative, said in their explanation why it should not be removed.
So God wants us to beat our children, basically.
Yeah.
It is, and I'm going to try and remember when I post this episode on social media to include some of these links in here. There's actually a map, and the map's pretty damn telling because it's got blue for states that have no corporal punishment, it's not allowed, and then it's got different shades of red for the states that do allow corporal punishment. And surprise, surprise, it is the Bible Belt below the Mason-Dixon line that they're all red, whereas above in the West Coast, they're blue. They don't allow corporal punishment. So they've kind of obviously moved forward in their way of thinking, whereas down here in Yeehawville...
Yeah, and that map isn't even up to date with where we are right now. But it does show very clearly where things are going and where they have been. And it was interesting. There was someone that wrote an article and they were talking about the resurgence of corporal punishment, which is something that was, troubling to me. And it was an NBC News article that was written last year. And the individual was talking about what they had seen when they were, younger. It was S.C. Beckner, and S.C. Beckner wrote, it's been 37 years since I was paddled at the age of 13. After running away from the residential Christian school I've been sent to by my parents for being emotionally out of control and refusing to attend school. Now again, the statistics that we'll share with you do not share private schools like Christian schools, so you won't be able to see what those statistics are. Most of them do not report. The man who hit me with a wooden paddle, air holes drilled into the ends for a better swing, was a hulking church deacon in a 3-piece suit. He stood at 6 feet 4 inches tall, with broad Neanderthalish features in comparison to my less than 5 feet 90-pound wayfish frame. This is going to hurt me more than it hurts you, he said, followed by, I'm doing this because I love you, little one. Then came the first swing of 3 that lifted my body, bent at the waist over the back of a chair, off the floor. Large knotted blackberry blue bruises rose on both sides of my buttocks, preventing me from sitting down for days. And we'll try to share the article so you can read it yourself. But again, this came out last year. At this point, it's been 38 years since... It was 37 last year. So they went into their experience, and it was traumatizing, and they share a lot more than that. And they also touch on the fact that everywhere else at this point, prisons, juvenile prisons, adult prisons, military...
Boot camp.
Yeah, you cannot inflict this type of physical pain on somebody, and that should really startle people, especially when people that are championing this are quoting the Bible. And it's not just Texas. Oklahoma, they had the same sort of thing that we did, where they were trying to get rid of corporal punishment in school. And again, they had an individual that quoted the Bible and talked about how, they said that, let's see, where was it? Jim Olson, a Republican representative, quoted the Bible verse from Proverbs, the rod and the rod proof gives wisdom. And he then went into more specific detail. Proverbs 29, the rod and rod proof give wisdom, but a child left to himself bringeth his mother to shame. So that would seem to endorse the use of corporal punishment. And again, this is being used to tell people that it's okay to do this in public school. And as you said, public school is secular. We've got people of about any faith you could imagine that attend school. And what does that say to them?
Yeah. Now, I do believe in Texas you have to sign a form to...
Yeah, it's either an opt-out form or an opt-in form.
Yeah, I forgot which one it was, whether it's you opt in or
opt-out.
Opt-out, you know. I forgot which one it was. But still, either way, that's still pretty screwed up. I think we have well enough psychiatric data to show hitting children is not positive. It doesn't get positive results. It doesn't help at all. And obviously, if, like you said, if this isn't allowed in military boot camps, if it's not allowed in prisons, in juvenile halls, or, any of these other places, yet we still allow it in our schools, and yet the conservatives are going to be like, the children are our most precious gift, so we're going to beat them.
It does come across really disingenuous. If they're this wonderful, precious gift, why would you want to inflict trauma? And I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. I'm not going to tell people how to parent, but I'm damn well going to tell you that beating the crap out of your kids is not parenting.
No, definitely not parenting. And you found something really, really interesting because, when we talk about religion in school and this whole thing about pushing religion in school, people think this is like a pretty new sort of thing, but you actually found historical documentation that went all the way back to something like 1840s. Where this was a religious fight in school over Bibles and religion being in school. Now, if I remember correctly, it was like the type of Bible, because it was like Catholic
Protestants versus Catholic, yeah.
But just the fact that we've gone since the 1800s, there's been this discussion of religion in school, what kind of religion, and in this case, you tell me it started a whole riot.
It did. It was really crazy. I had never heard of the Bible riots before. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they just skipped that because they just didn't want to get into it. But when in May 1844, riots broke out in Kensington, Philadelphia, or the Kensington region. It was known as the Bible riots, and it lasted for 3 days. It involved American-born Protestants and Irish immigrants. And it was interesting because it was, I think, much less about the Bible being in school, because at the time you could have biblical education. It was the fact that the individuals that had been born over the years in the Kensington area and felt they had inheritance through that birth began to feel a bit of competition between the Irish settlers that were coming to the area. And so even though they had worked with these folks and they had done all these different union strikes together, and they had worked really well together to continue doing things and making progress. It wasn't until the Irish population that was coming to the region began to outpace the existing people there that they started to then use that as a way to, I guess, essentially start a war between the two as a way to try and stop the workers from taking their jobs.
I mean, it read just so much like if I read this, I'd be, taking the Bible part out, but the reason for it just sounds exactly like the conservative talking points now about the border. It's like they're taking our jobs, they're taking our houses, they're bringing crime, these darn immigrants. Well, these are Irish immigrants at that time, and it's just amazing that you just rinse and repeat the same shit over again and people fall for it and they're like, yeah,
which is important to remember when you see religion being injected into the argument wherever it is. A lot of times it has a lot more to do with other things, and it's just a way to try to combat something on another front. So yeah, it was really interesting, but it was not, like I said, that was one thing that didn't pass that should have passed, which would have prevented corporal punishment. The other issues that we've seen where obviously the In God We Trust thing did pass, and I believe that was last year.
So explain to them what the In God
We Trust was created as the motto for the nation, and that is how they decided that they'd be able to install it in every public school in the state of Texas. And by installing it, it means that someone had to donate to them a very specific size, type, font, coloration, framed In God We Trust, and that would have to be displayed in a prominent public area of every public school in the state. And yes, people absolutely did spend a crap load of money to create these and hand them out, and if they were provided, it couldn't be denied, it had to be put up. So that was an area that they did win that, and you can't really fight it on the stance that it's indoctrinating kids or placing religion in school, because again, it became our national motto quite a while back, and so they got around it that way.
Yeah, in like the 50s, it became our motto, right? And if I remember correctly, it was the way that we could fight against communism. So
some are, thumb our nose at the invasion of communism as we were in the Soviet era issues.
Yeah, and yes, because I'm going to have somebody come back on this, because when I've talked about it on social media, people will be like, In God We Trust was on our money all the way since like the 1800s. Yes, in the 1800s, on certain coins, certain coins, I think it was like the 2-cent piece, they had In God We Trust, but it was added to money and all of that as part of our actual motto more in the 50s. That's when it kind of became the big thing. So yes, in the 1800s, there was a 2-cent piece that had In God We Trust on it. But it wasn't on the rest of the money.
If we're going to argue that, then there was in 1787, there was a Fugio cent that was actually Benjamin Franklin. It was a design that actually says, mind your business on the coin. And I honestly think I'd like to see that one come back. So
definitely. Can we get mind your business on all of our money moving forward?
Yeah, it's really cool. If you have a chance to go look at it, on the one side it says we are one, and it has 13 chain links. And the other side, it says, mind your business. And it shows a sun and a sundial. And it's really cool looking, 1787. So I would not have been sad if we had kept that as, our tokens.
Yeah. I'd love to see mind your business on my money rather than In God We Trust.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun, honestly. But yeah, I digress. I know that's not exactly what we're talking about, but it's a poor example of why we should be putting it up there. And it was definitely a way to try and end around people's disfavor of just indoctrinating or forcing a specific religion on people.
Yeah. And again, as we talk about some of these things, it depends on, again, this kind of depends on where you live. If you're in a more conservative state, I would say these things are either happening or they're in process. And they're kind of using states like Texas and Florida to test the waters and see, okay, what do we need to do to get this passed through? Because, they do a bunch of trials in Texas. When it finally passes in Texas, they know, okay, these are the things that people objected about it, so they know how to put the bills together in a better way in the other conservative states as they move forward. But I would say if you're not in a conservative state and you're in a more liberal state, doesn't necessarily make you safe, because as we've seen over time, they're able to, the conservatives and the Christian nationalists have been able to get laws moved into non-conservative states just through other means. Either they get the Supreme Court to knock something out, Roe v. Wade, or
the Supreme Court just arbitrarily decides to pick up a case and move forward with that as a way to, I guess, push something. They've done that in several different instances. One of the ones that involved, again, religion in school was the praying coach that ended up losing. Well, they didn't actually lose their job, so I'm not going to say lost their job. They didn't renew their contract, but people made it very clear that they didn't feel what he was doing was right, and then he used that as his validation for why he shouldn't be in that environment. But he tells everyone he lost his job. He actually just didn't renew his contract. So.
Yeah, and again, that's fine. If the problem that I have with all of this is, it's like, okay, but why is your religion more important than everybody else's? If you get time to pray, then everybody else should get time to pray or worship in some way, shape, or form. If you get 5 minutes and everybody else gets 5 minutes, I guess we got to take an hour or two out of the day just to do, religious worshiping in school, where it's really not supposed to be part of the school curriculum.
Well, and I think that's one that didn't pass. I'll have to double check. That was something they did want to do in Texas as well, where it wasn't just that they could have Bibles in school, which, again, fine if you're using it as part of a comprehensive curriculum that is discovering different aspects of all religions, but one single religion's Bible does not belong as a school endorsed book. But they wanted to allow prayer over the PA system. They wanted to allow prayer time for teachers. They wanted to allow in a much more aggressive fashion. I have zero issue with people having time in the day, and I mean small amount of time, to pray to whatever gods, deities, belief systems they have silently. Zero issue. That is your time to center yourself or focus on whatever or worship whatever. Fine. But that's a silent moment. And it should be. It's between you and whatever it is that you're trying to connect with.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to do it, do 5 minutes of silent time in the morning. And if you want to take that 5 minutes to pray silently again to yourself, then so be it. Definitely shouldn't be over the PA system. Definitely shouldn't be led by the teacher or influenced by the teacher either. And that would be just the other thing that I would say would happen is, a teacher would take it upon themselves to influence it, because we've seen all sorts of shit from teachers.
Literally, we've dealt with it. We've had a teacher who did end up getting fired, and I was very happy about that. I was sad that they put themselves in that position. Of course, that's not what you want. But I had one of our kids was very sick. They were not doing well in class, and I would often go and pick them up from school, and this teacher decided to give them a Bible and ask if they could pray. And again, it's up to our kids what they want. My kid expressed they were incredibly uncomfortable with the situation, that they kind of tried to say no thank you, and that it was pushed on them, and that's when I had an issue. If the teacher had handed it to them and they had taken it and it had ended right there, I wouldn't have cared, because that's up to my kids. But the minute that they're made to feel intimidated, like they have to participate in something or they have to do something or accept something, now we're getting into a bit of a problematic area for me.
Well, and this was in elementary school, and I would actually sort of counter-argument a little that I would have even had a problem if they would have handed her the Bible, because in elementary school, most children are taught to obey the teacher and to obey the adults. So they're going to, by default, just go along with what the teacher wants.
Right. I guess to preface that, we have always been very open with our kids, and they've been allowed to go to church with, family members or whatever, anytime they wanted to do that. So at that point, I know she had been exposed to it, and I knew if she accepted it because she just wanted to be polite or whatever, that was fine. But other kids, they don't necessarily have the wherewithal to understand that. So yeah, definitely it was not appropriate.
Yeah. I mean, we've raised our kids to be free thinking, critical thinking since a young age. And we've also, raised them that adults aren't always right.
Even us.
Yeah, even us. But, just because an adult tells you to do something does not mean that you need to do that. And, that goes a little bit into things like bathroom breaks and stuff like that they try and restrict in schools. And
we had one kid that just wasn't going to put up with that and kind of directly put the kibosh on it. So.
Yeah, she. It is a good story. So I'm going to tell it on this because...
I'm sorry ahead of time. No names.
No names. It was in high school, and she asked permission to go to the restroom, and the teacher said no. Which, I'm sorry, that's just bullshit. If somebody has to go take a leak or something, let them go to the bathroom.
You damn well know they're not paying for the doctor bill if they get a urinary tract infection. But anyway.
And so we had always told our kids, if a teacher or somebody in school tries to tell you, no, you cannot use the bathroom, to just go anyways. And if the school wants to call, they can call us and we will totally back you. And so she asked, the teacher said no. She got up, she started walking. The teacher said, what are you doing? And she said, I'm going to the bathroom. She said, you can't go to the bathroom. And she said, look, I'm going to take a piss. Now, I can either do it in your garbage can right here in front of the class, or I'm going to the bathroom. And the funny thing is, knowing this child, she would have dropped pants and pissed in that garbage can right there in front of the whole class if the teacher would have challenged her on it. So needless to say, she went to the bathroom, and they never called us on that one or anything, because by then the school kind of knew we're not going to really get anywhere with their parents because... Yeah.
We're that parent. And I'm going to shamelessly plug a little bit. If you guys are involved with the Satanic Temple or have curiosity about it, there is actually a Protect Child project that deals with this exact thing. And there is a card that your kids can have that you can, give to them, that they can present to their school quietly, privately, that says that they have inalienable rights and bodily autonomy, and that if those rights are infringed, then it can cause further action. So it's a really cool thing. You can check that out on their website, and they've got their campaigns, and it's listed under there. So
yeah. So back to the type of shit that they're trying to push in here. So God, we did the In God We Trust.
That one passed.
Yeah, we talked about the
10 Commandments.
Corporal punishment
Was another one that they tried to do.
So 10 Commandments they tried.
That failed. And I was really pleased. I do not have the gentleman's name, but he was a Republican, a Christian Republican that is actually in our Texas legislature. And they pushed back and said that they disagree with it for a number of reasons. It was idolatry, not adultery, where you're worshiping something else, and putting it in there was not in line with their beliefs, and that there was a lot of really great arguments made by this individual, and he was really well spoken. He countered it very well against the person that was introducing it. But the gist of it was that every classroom, and not just in a building prominently placed, every room in the school would have to display prominently the 10 Commandments.
Now, again, this is public school, a secular public school. And I would totally expect that if you were sending your child to a Catholic or a Christian school. Okay, you sent them to a Catholic Christian school. Of course, they're going to have the 10 Commandments on the wall. But in a public secular school where you have people of all denominations, all religions, even atheists, everything from that through, why would you put one religion prominently on the wall? Well, that is just wrong.
And I don't know what people think of Texas. I'm sure a lot of people that aren't here have ideas, but we have a very diverse population. And even where we are, which is outskirts of the Houston area, we have every type of denomination of child that attends a school. And I don't know what a difficult position it would be as a student who, otherwise would look at their teacher and you either like them or you don't, whatever. But then if you know that they're pushing a particular belief and it's not one you share, and they seem to have, a particular favoritism towards other kids that do share that belief, it's going to put you in a very awkward position. It's going to make you incredibly uncomfortable. And the more that's pushed, the more you're going to isolate other people and other thought.
Yeah. I can totally see teachers using that in a discriminatory manner, even when it goes to grading papers and stuff like that. It's human nature. We've seen centuries of how people from one religion treat people of another religion a different way, you know? And so to think that most people will be able to compartmentalize themselves and not do that is just asinine. You know, it's human nature. It's what they will do. A lot of these religions are taught that they are the truth. I mean, I've actually gotten in conversations with people who claimed not to be religious. So I'm like, okay, you're not religious. You don't believe in God no, I believe in God and Jesus and Christian. I'm like, okay, so you're religious. No. I'm not religious because Christianity's the truth.
Or it's a relationship.
And and religion is a false belief. And so because I'm Christian, I'm not religious. I follow the truth. And to me, that's just complete and total bullshit. It's like, no, you're religious. Now you're just trying to, play games with words.
Right.
So,
and there were, in my childhood, I can say, teachers that were obviously religious, but they didn't overly, push that out there, and they just exemplified that belief in their actions, which I am totally fine with. I'm totally fine with that. It's when you start pushing it and expecting kids to learn it, or using your Bible as a way to push an opinion or thought or to make people feel uncomfortable, then it's just gross. But we're way off topic.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was that we talked about the campus setting aside time for employees to read the Bible or religious text and pray. That one actually never passed it passed the Senate, but it didn't go further than that. Then we talked about the 10 Commandments. That one did not pass, thanks to a lot of people having positions that they shared. I know I wrote something. I believe you wrote something. Multiple people wrote something. There was a period in Texas where you're allowed to submit your own statement about a law. Not everything that's put up for voting is given that opportunity, but this one was. And so, yeah, I definitely did that. And then there was what was the other one? Oh, chaplains. The chaplains in school.
Yes, the chaplains replacing counselors.
That one was really crazy to me. Now, this did pass. It was Senate Bill 763. You can look this one up. It allows for Texas schools to use safety funds. Again, safety funds. That's what allows your kids to have security and other things that are necessary. And I don't know if you've kept up, but there's been a lot of issues in these schools. But, Anyway, it uses safety funds to allow for schools to pay for unlicensed chaplains to work in mental health roles. Now, mind you, these individuals are not trained in child psychiatrics. They're not trained in child development. They are not understanding those important things that one would want, a counselor role to have, and they don't have to be involved in a certified program.
You even said unlicensed.
Yeah.
So no licensing, so unlicensed chaplains.
Yeah.
To replace school counselors.
It was delayed because some House members wanted an amendment to require chaplains to have accreditation, and that was defeated. There was also a request to allow it to be pluralistic, to allow people of different faiths. That was defeated. It was also requested that parents would be able to opt out. That was defeated. So what finally passed was what they wanted in the first place, which was just to ensure that they would be allowed to do that. Now, they made sure to say that no school can be compelled to do this, that it's up to them, and they can put whatever rules and regulations in place that they want as they see fit. I don't know if you know much about schools, but if they do adopt this, which the board has to vote on, and the board is made up not always of people that the community has put there, then they would be able to arbitrarily decide what the recommendations and what the requirements would be around this program.
Yeah. And in a state like Texas, I can guarantee you that a lot of these schools will adopt this program. And so instead of having trained, licensed school counselors, you are going to have unlicensed chaplains in the school. And again, unlicensed chaplains also are not mandatory reporters.
Yeah, that's another important thing, that they don't have to report abuse or of physical or sexual abuse at all. So, and another really important, kind of scary thing for me, and I don't know how much of this program will be adopted into a school. I don't know that it will be adopted anywhere. People may opt to just not do it at all. If you are in Texas and you don't like this idea, please write your school board, because that's going to help with that. But
Maybe.
it does make a difference, because these school boards do need community support. And so the less support they have, the more likely they are to not support it, because they want to continue with their position.
Yeah.
But again, that's not a guarantee, but it is important that you voice your concerns. But the issue I have is, what about kids that are struggling with very intimate issues or having problems at home? If you start saying things that are very obvious platitudes and dismissing it, or telling them to pray about it and not providing them useful, applicable, helpful information, then what is that going to do to a kid's confidence? How does that affect someone that's dealing with suicidal ideation, or that's struggling with sexual identity? Things that are going to come up, and would normally be someplace they could at least have a starting point to learn or to get other resources to deal with.
Right. I mean, they're supposed to be able to go to a licensed counselor who is supposed to be unbiased. Now, we know human behavior, but if you have a chaplain in there, that is a religious position. That it is a person from a religious, I don't know what you want to say, religious community, who is now going to be promoting their religious doctrine to children in order to fix their problems. My parents beat me. Oh, well, in Paul 3:29, you should read this and see, is there something you're doing that's causing your parents to act that way? Because spare the rod, spoil the child, and you just might be at fault for getting beat. And that's just total BS. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's just not going to fly. But in the Texas legislature, it did. And so, again, if you're not in these conservative states, I would still be concerned, because these things have a way. And if you don't believe that Christian nationalists and Project Blitz and all of that sort of stuff is out there, and they have a well-planned agenda to move this stuff nationwide, they do. They know where to start. They know where the path of least resistance is, so they could get their claws in. And then all of a sudden from there, it starts to spread to other places and other places.
Well, it's smart, because they put things in, they'll present a Senate bill and a House bill, so they're hitting it from two different angles. But I did want to make a clarification and a correction. So I did find which representative it was that fought against the Ten Commandment bill. It is a Democratic State Representative, James Tallarico, from Austin. Yes, from Austin. I can hear some of you folks sighing. But they accused Republicans of trying to force public schools to display it. And then they went on to say that they were a devout Christian, and that, to me, it's not only unconstitutional, it's un-American and deeply un-Christian. And I say this because I believe this bill is idolatrous. I believe it's exclusionary. I believe it's arrogant. And those three things in my reading of the gospel are diametrically opposed to the teachings of Jesus. So I will say I very much appreciate this individual for standing up against one of these bills, and the way that they did it, and the professional way that they addressed the situation.
Okay, so he wasn't a Republican.
He wasn't a Republican. It was represented by a Republican who admitted it. It was Candy Noble who submitted this and championed it. So, yeah, they spoke up against the person that was submitting it, and they really did a great job. There's some video out there of their speaking. I just couldn't recall it, but it's Representative James Tallarico, Democratic representative out of Austin.
So, but they are Christian,
yeah.
and I kind of love it when Christians defeat other Christians on things that, should be defeated, because at the end of the day, if you look at least the words that they have in their Bible about the type of person Christ was, I don't really remember anything in there where Christ said, go ahead and indoctrinate kids in school with this, Well,
and this is where I do kind of push back, because there are people that are religious that fight back against this. It was really, and if you are a Christian, you're listening, thank you. But the way that he did this is he actually quoted a Bible verse, he used it to say, this is why this is wrong. It was Matthew 6:5. Don't be like hypocrites who love to pray publicly on street corners. When you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. And it just went on to talk about things like that. But again, so eloquently utilized the true teachings based on their personal interpretation of their religion. Mm-hmm. And I say true teaching not to say that it is true or truth, but based on what they believe the Bible is trying to express, that it was something to be personal and private, and that when you lord it in front of other people, you're actually demeaning the faith that you supposedly follow. But again, this was one of many bills, but it wasn't like, if it wasn't for people like him, who was publicly happy to come out against it, we would not maybe be in this position, and we would now be dealing with, well, what do we do in a couple of weeks when our kid goes back to school?
Yeah. And so there is a lot of religious ideology being pushed into the schools, and then the one that we hear out a lot on the news is all these book bannings and things like that, and I think that'll be its own subject.
Yeah. I know there was a temple service that myself and a few other ministers were able to speak on, and it specifically talked about the book bans, and we were of very different opinions on how to handle some of that, but we all agreed that it was very concerning. Some of us did not think it was fair to remove the Bible based on the context of what they said was an inappropriate book. And I understand why. Myself, I believe that if you're going to say these are the restrictions and the Bible happens to fall under that, then it too should be removed.
Yeah. I don't think I don't think removing the Bible is a way to try and get empathy, because I think a lot of these people are way beyond empathy. Mm-hmm. I think it's more of, no, you have to play by the same rules. And so if these are the rules you set up for everybody else, well, guess what? The rules apply to you too. Oh, you don't like the rules? Well, that sucks. How about don't implement the fucking rules?
Yeah. And to be clear, like some other people had said, I don't think it should be removed if it's not being forced on people. If people want it there and it's not mandatory in every class from being used to announce it from the loudspeaker, that's fine. The only time it should be included in a classroom setting is if it's with a bunch of other religious text and being discussed in an intellectual, non-biased comparative. But again, how realistic is that?
Yeah, I just don't think that one's all that realistic. So, I think that's sort of in a very broad, the type of stuff that is going on right now. The ideology that we're seeing being pushed into schools, again, firsthand here on what I'd consider the front lines, which is Texas, because it's its own little sort of theocracy within inside of itself. And, so be aware, even if you're not in a conservative state, these are things that you need to be aware of, and just, is this something that you want in our country? We're not, this isn't how our country is set up. So
no. And just remember, if you are a person that has a deeply held belief, that's great. And if you want to teach that to your kids and have them grow with that, you have ample opportunity outside of school. There's lots of different opportunities for you to share that with your kids. And if you have been honest and upfront and shared with them things, don't be afraid for it to be challenged, because that's the only way that we learn where we fit within the world and what our beliefs are for ourselves. You could share whatever you want with your kids. That does not guarantee they're going to take to it, and that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, we've always supported our kids no matter what they wanted to study. We opened it up to them and allowed them that opportunity. And that's generally the way that most Satanists, is that we do not look to indoctrinate children. Children should be allowed to research and find their own path, and when they're old enough, make their own decision on that. So. Yeah,
I mean, and before, they're going to start to assert who they are way before they're old enough, but definitely they're, once they're old enough to go off and decide whatever it is, if they want to start going to church or whatever, go do that.
Yeah, but not in school. Yeah. And so, I think with that, we've covered a lot of this. We'll cover other areas like book bans and stuff like that at a later date, but I think we've done a I think we've pretty much covered ground on what's going on here in schools.
Yeah. So if you have feedback, thoughts, opinions, feel free to let us know. And if there's stuff you'd like to see us talk about, make sure to hit us up on social media or anywhere that you find us and let us know what that might be. And we're happy to possibly go ahead and add that in to one of our next podcasts.
Awesome. Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.